All rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
The 54th session of the Senate and the second regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. Today we will be led in prayer by our distinguished colleague from Ilocos Norte, Senator Amy Marcos.
Ama namin makapangyarihan at mapagmahal, tinipon mo kami sa ngalan ng iyong anak na si Jesus. Padaluyin mo sa amin ang iyong awat biyaya sa panahon binabakbakan ang aming minamahal na Senado ng amin pangangailangan na siyang kailangan sagutin. Imulat po ninyo ang aming mga mata sa kasamaang aming nagawa sa lahat ng aming pagkukulang, habang basbasan rin po ninyo ang bumabatikos at tumutuligsa po sa amin. Patawarin mo kami sa aming maraming pagkukulang upang maging mabuti at makatarungan. Himukin po kami upang ang puso ng sambayan ng Pilipino at akayin nyo kami pabalik sa inyo. Dumudulog kami ng mawakasan ang karahasan dulot ng masasakit na salita, mapanirang paratang, nakamamatay na sandata o pagbubulag-bulagan. Naway maging kanlungan ng inyong kapayapaan ang aming Senado, ang aming bayan at ang buong mundo. Kasiyahan nawa tayo ng Panginoon. Amen.
Amen. Secretary, please call the roll of members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
We have 25 senators present. That is 24 in full attendance, together with Senator Ralph Recto, who we wish well and are happy to see him. He is now Secretary Ralph Recto, Secretary of Department of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you.
Sorry, Department of Finance. My apologies. Department of Finance.
It's probably because of our guest
We have
today.
guests. We have
Mr.
guests,
President.
absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. President. Other than our esteemed colleague, former Senate President Pro Tem, and now Secretary of Finance, Secretary Ralph Recto, we also have with us, and we are deeply honored to have in our session hall today.
Yes, before you recognize them, may I ask all my colleagues and our guests in the hall to just settle down so that the Majority Floor Leader can recognize our very important guests from France.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As I have said, we are deeply honored to have in our session hall today the delegation from the France Southeast Asia Interparliamentary Friendship Group of the French Senate, led by its President, Senator Olivier Henno. He is joined by Senator Fabien Genet, Vice President, Senator Patrice Joly, President dedicated for the Philippines, Senator Catherine Belhiriti, Senator Ann Von Talon, and Senator Jean-Jacques Lusac. Accompanying the delegation is the French Ambassador to the Philippines, Her Excellency Marie Fontanelle. We warmly welcome all of you in this august chamber.
Yes, and may I add, Majority Leader, we are very glad to welcome to the Senate our friends from the France Southeast Asia Parliamentary Friendship Group. Maybe we can ask our colleagues to first settle down. We can suspend session to greet them one by one and have a photo opportunity so that they don't miss my message. Yeah. We'll ask our colleagues to session.
May I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Once again, I'd just like to say, we're very glad to welcome to the Senate our friends of the France Southeast Asia Parliamentary Friendship Group of the French Senate. We celebrate 77 years of our diplomatic relations with France. I'd like to welcome the head of the delegation, Honorable Olivier Henno, as well as Senators, my dear friend, Senator Fabien Genet, Senator Patrice Joly, Senator Catherine Belhiti, Senator Anne Ventelon, and Senator Jean-Jacques Luzac. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency the Ambassador, Maria Fontanelle, and Mr. Thomas Rollet of the French Embassy, and Miss Anne-Laure Saint-Dizier, who's a very good friend of ours who always takes care of us when we're in France for our visits also to the parliamentary group there. Although the Philippines and France are oceans apart, a strong thread of freedom and independence runs between us. And with the French Senate in particular, we enjoy a deep friendship built on mutual respect and on shared values of democracy, liberty, and bicameralism. Today, we take pride in our active efforts to strengthen our bilateral ties and explore the avenues for deeper and broader collaboration between our two nations. We have in the Senate an existing Philippines-France Parliamentary Friendship Association, one of our biggest and most active parliamentary friendship groups, with 20 members out of the 24 members of the Senate, under the leadership of no other than Senate President pro tempore, Senator Loren Legarda. Interparliamentary exchanges between our two countries have been robust, characterized by regular reciprocal visits. In 2022, we undertook a successful parliamentary visit to France with 7 of our colleagues, namely Senators Loren Legarda or Legarde, Senator Joel Villeneuve, Senator J.V. Ejercito, Senator Manuel Lito Lapid, Senator Nancy Binay, Senator Grace Poe, and Senator Bong Go. There, we met with their Senate President, the Honorable Gerard Larcher, a dear friend of the Senate of the Philippines, as well as other members of the interparliamentary friendship groups in the French Senate and their National Assembly. The visit proved important as we learned from France's successful utilization of renewable energy, explored potential collaborations in energy production, climate action, and defense cooperation. And we hope to continue our collaborative efforts in the many fields that bind us together, from freedom of navigation to free and open trade between our two nations. We take this visit as a strong sign of the French Senate's commitment to deepening our ties and building on the gains that we have made 77 years of Philippine-French friendship. May our friendship endure without end. From all of us in the Senate present today, we wholeheartedly say to you, Bienvenue au Sénat Philippine and mabuhay. Thank you. So I'd like now to ask my colleagues I'll suspend session
Yes,
and we
Mr.
have a
President,
photo opportunity with them.
may I move that we suspend the session for a minute and invite our distinguished guests from the French Senate, as well as Ambassador Fontanelle, to join our Senate President at the rostrum.
Session suspended for a minute. Session resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we proceed, Mr. President, may we just acknowledge some guests from the gallery. We have with us Governor Caico of the great province of Batanes. We also have with us the guests of Senator Estrada, Commissioner Namar Kulayan, and Commissioner Nasser Marohom Salik of the National Amnesty Commission. Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. is here with us, Mr. President, and Senior Yusek Isidro Purisima of OPAPRU, Yusek Juan Victor Llamas of DILG, Yusek Angelito De Leon of DND, and Attorney Gwendolyn Pimentel Gana. Mr. President, we also have with us guests of this representation and Senator Cayetano, Alan Cayetano, Mayor Divina Fontanilla of Bocnotan, La Union, LGU officials of Libagon, Southern Leyte, led by Vice Mayor Elizabeth Saldivar, LGU officials of Asturias, Cebu, led by Vice Mayor Melvin Labuca, officials of Barangay Canluran, Santa Rosa, Laguna, Bagong Bayani Rescue Volunteers, Laguna Chapter, Bayaning Motorista members, Mariano Marcos State University Federated Alumni Association members. We welcome them in this August chamber. Guests of Senator Revilla, LGU officials of Claveria, Misamis Oriental, led by Vice Mayor Reynante Salvalion. Guests of Senator Tolentino, Vice Mayor Saul Maraon of Salug, Zamboanga del Norte, Mr. Barry Gusi, and guests of this representation, our friends from IB PAP, Mr. President, Ms. Celeste Ilagan, Ms. Nikki Agkawili, and Ms. Jenny Marshall. We welcome all of them in this August chamber.
Welcome to your Senate, ladies and gentlemen. Dear Governor, Governor Batanes, welcome. And of course, Secretary Galvez, welcome as well. It's great to see you, as always. Sorry I was not able to see you earlier. We had so much meetings to handle. But thank you and welcome to your Senate. To all the guests, welcome.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 53rd Session, Tuesday, February 20, 2024, and consider the same as approved.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
There being no objection, we ask Secretary to proceed with the reference of business.
Bill on first reading, Senate number 2559, an act regulating the practice of plumbing engineering in the Philippines, repealing for the purpose RA 1378, Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Civil Service and Finance.
Resolution, proposed Senate Resolution 934, commending and congratulating the members of the Senate Lady Defenders team for winning the silver medal in the UNTV Volleyball League. Senator Go.
To the Committee on Rules.
Committee reports, Committee Report number 200 by the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation on House Concurrent Resolution number 19, concurring with Proclamation number 403 of the President of the Republic of the Philippines, dated November 22, 2023, entitled Granting Amnesty to Members of the Revolutionaryong Partido ng Manggagawa ng Pilipinas, Revolutionary Proletarian Army, Alex Bongkaya Brigade, who have committed crimes punishable under the Revised Penal Code and special penal laws in furtherance of their political beliefs. Recommending its adoption without amendment, sponsor Senator Estrada.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 201 by the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation on House Concurrent Resolution number 20, concurring with Proclamation number 404 of the President of the Philippines, dated November 22, 2023, entitled Granting Amnesty to former members of the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, National Democratic Front, who have committed crimes against punishable under the Revised Penal Code and special penal laws in the furtherance of their political beliefs. Recommending its adoption without amendment, Senator Estrada.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 202 by the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation, House Concurrent Resolution 21, concurring with Proclamation number 405 of the President of the Republic of the Philippines, dated November 22, 2023, granting amnesty to members of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front who have committed crimes punishable under the RPC and special penal laws in furtherance of their political beliefs. Recommending its adoption without amendment, sponsor Senator Estrada.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report 203 by the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation, House Concurrent Resolution 22, concurring with Proclamation number 406 of the President of the Republic of the Philippines, dated November 22, 2023, granting amnesty to members of the Moro National Liberation Front who have committed crimes punishable under the Revised Penal Code and special penal laws in furtherance of their political beliefs. Recommending its adoption without amendment, sponsor Senator Estrada.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Please proceed with the additional reference.
Additional reference of business, Committee Report 204, jointly by the Committees on Banks, Financial Institutions and Currencies, Justice and Human Rights, and Finance on Senate number 2560, with Senators Poe, Marcos, Zubiri, Estrada, Villanueva, Gatchalian, Legarda, Revilla Jr., and Villar M. as authors. An act prohibiting money mules and other fraudulent acts involving bank accounts, e-wallets, and other financial accounts, and providing penalties therefore. Recommending its approval in substitution of Senate numbers 336, 1663, 2039, 2171, 2306, and 2407, taking into consideration House number 7393, sponsor Senator Villar M.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this juncture, I move that we transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders, Committee Report number 204 on Senate Bill number 2560. This pertains to the Anti-Financial Account Scamming Act, or AFASA. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 2560 under Committee Report number 204 and ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
There being no objection, we ask Secretary to proceed with the reading of the measure.
An act prohibiting money mules and other fraudulent acts involving bank accounts, e-wallets, and other financial accounts, and providing penalties therefore.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, I move that we recognize our Deputy Majority Leader, Senator Mark Villar, Chairperson of the Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies, to deliver the sponsorship speech.
Our distinguished colleague, Senator Mark Villar, the Chairman of the Committee on Banks, is recognized.
Mr. President, my esteemed colleagues, our honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant afternoon to all of you. I am honored to stand before you as a champion against any and all kinds of scams and cyber crimes. Today, I am appealing for your earnest support for the Anti-Financial Account Scamming Act, or AFASA. Recently, we have observed a trend towards digitalization of transactions for both government and private sector. However, there is also the alarming rise of cases of online scamming as reported by the PNP Anti-Cybercrime Group and the NBI Cybercrime Division. One issue that we need to first act upon as we digitalize our economy. Mr. President, what we're about to show you are only a few Filipinos out of the thousands who fell victims to online scammers.
Kwento ni John Bansil, January 23 nang masimot ang 10,600 pesos sa kanyang account at nalipat sa isang merchant kahit wala na
President, apart from what you have watched, we had hundreds of cases of scamming reported to the NBI Cybercrime Division just 2 weeks ago, where account holders of e-wallets like Maya and GCash had their money siphoned out of their wallets. These e-wallet users had their hard-earned money transferred to a particular merchant despite having no transactions with them. More than 300,000 pesos po ang nawala sa mga e-wallet users in just a snap, Mr. President. Tulad po ng inyong nakita sa video, kasama po sa mga naging biktima ng mga scammers na ito ay isang cancer patient na gagamitin sana ng kanyang pera para sa kanyang chemotherapy at mga gamot. Because of these scammers, he was deprived of the care he needed at the crucial time. This shows that the impact of scamming goes beyond financial distress for scam victims. The same can also be said for the thousands of victims who reported their cases to the PNP Anti-Cybercrime Division last year. Mr. President, in the span of only 8 months, the PNP Anti-Cybercrime Group reported drastic numbers of Filipinos who fell victim to different financial cybercrimes, such as online selling scams, investment scams, ATM fraud, phishing, call scams or phishing, employment scams, loan scams, package scams, profile hijacking, accommodation scams, and love scams. From January to August of 2023, the proliferation of multiple types of scams has financially burdened victims who have lost a total of 155,204,358, resulting in financial losses for more than 8,000 Filipinos. One of these types of scams, ATM or credit card fraud or phishing victimized more than 600 individuals, totaling a loss of 3,193,209 pesos. The PNP ACG reported that most of the victims of this type of scam belong to the 41 to 50-year-old age group. This speaks volumes of how vulnerability to online scams endangers the way of life of our fellow Filipinos, especially those who are already in disadvantageous situations. Mr. President, just last week, this representation was informed that there is a new type of scam going around, the QR code scam, wherein scammers defraud financial account holders through the use of devious QR codes. Nakakuha po ng mga scammers na ito ang mga QR codes ng mga financial account holders at ginagamit nila ito para sa mga unauthorized transactions. Ang pinaghihirapan ng ating mga kapwa Pilipino na para sana sa kanilang pang-araw-araw na gastusin ay ninanakaw lamang ng mga scammers. These are heinous crimes against our people, Mr. President, and it is upon us to ensure that they will be put to a stop as soon as possible. Currently, we have laws that intend to protect the public against online banking and financial scams. Some of these laws are the following: Republic Act number 11765, or the Financial Products and Services Consumer Protection Act, which is intended to protect the interests of consumers of financial products and services. Number 2, the Republic Act 11934, or the Subscriber Identity Module or SIM Registration Act, which mandates the registration of all SIM cards issued by telecommunication companies. And number 3, Republic Act number 10175, or the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012, which has been the primary law that punishes illegal and abusive internet-related crimes, including financial cybercrimes. Notwithstanding the enactment of the said laws, and despite strong efforts of the anti-cybercrime group to hold scammers accountable for their crimes, some of the complaints submitted to them could not be filed in courts due to the difficulty of tracing and identifying the perpetrators. Another difficulty in filing cybercrime cases is the tedious process of obtaining necessary data from banks and financial institutions. Once reported to the Philippine National Police, they need first to secure cyber warrants against the banks or financial institutions concerned to get access to the records to unearth the scammer's identity. While they can get the digital footprint from the banks, the existing laws related to data privacy, Bank Secrecy Law, and Data Privacy Act further prohibit access to specific information, creating another layer of difficulty in attribution. The bureaucratic hurdles of securing the identity of scammers heighten their assurance that they will not be caught. As such, it is high time that we eliminate this self-assurance by enacting laws that will effectively address the looming problems of scamming. As presented, the responsiveness of our laws to address the rising number of financial scams is wanting. This is due to the fact that the modus of these scammers is evolving faster than the capability of our law enforcement agencies to deter them. The current laws we have that deal with the financial cybercrimes are essentially centered on criminal prosecution rather than crime prevention. Now we have the AFASA, which is aimed at preserving the trust of the public in online and digital finance transactions, also further boosting digital trade by providing not only the appropriate sanctions, but also the authority and power to concerned government agencies to prevent fraud. Allow me to present the salient features of the sponsored measure as we pursue institutionalized efforts that can effectively go against scammers who have denied our fellow Filipinos the right to safe and secure digital transactions. Mr. President, an and esteemed colleagues, the AFASA will provide safety measures that will go after financial cybercrimes, such as being a money mule, committing social engineering schemes, and economic sabotage. The AFASA will serve as a firewall against these financial cybercrimes that will help us restore and preserve the trust of the public in digital transactions and further boost digital trade by providing appropriate sanctions against online scammers. AFASA also provides the responsibility of responsible institutions to protect and secure their clients' financial accounts, such as mandating them to have adequate risk management systems and controls, including, but not limited to, multi-factor authentication, fraud management systems, other account holder enrollment, and verification processes. They are granted the authority, with the period subscribed by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, to temporarily hold disputed funds that are subject to complaints from an aggrieved party and based on information from another responsible institution. These responsible institutions shall be held liable for any loss or damage incurred against their clients if they do not comply with the requirements for adequate risk management systems and controls as determined by the BSP. Magkakaroon na po ng solusyon ang ating mga kababayan na maibalik sa kanila ang perang kanilang pinaghirapan nang hindi na kinakailangan na lumapit sa alinman hukuman. Through AFASA, we will have stronger safeguards against fraudulent transactions by arming our financial institutions with risk management systems that will grant them sufficient power and authority to flag suspicious transactions. Further intensified penalties from fines of hundreds of thousands to life imprisonment are imposed by AFASA against convicted scammers. It also identifies corporate liabilities or when the crime is committed on behalf of or for the benefit of a juridical person or a person leading a corporation to have the fine increased to at least double the imposed or up to a maximum of 10 million pesos. This signifies our commitment to lessening and then completely eradicating scammers and their crimes against our fellow Filipinos. Mr. President and my dear colleagues, hindi na po natin hayaan na tumaas pa ang bilang ng mga nabibiktima ng mga online scams. Kapag naipasa na ang AFASA, mababawasan po at matitigil na ang paglaganap ng mga scams na ito. Mabibigyan natin ng peace of mind ang mga Pilipino na ang kanilang mga pinaghirapan ay hindi mapupunta sa mga scammers. Mr. President, to close, allow me to extend my gratitude to our esteemed colleagues who helped in crafting the AFASA. Our dear Senate President Mig Subiri, Senate Pro Tempore Loren Legarda, Majority Leader Senator Joel Villanueva, Senator Grace Poe, Senator Amy Marcos, Senator Jingo Estrada, and Senator Win Gatchalian. Thank you very much to our colleagues here at the Senate and our counterparts in the House of Representatives who earnestly worked hard to help us in our fight against scammers. In a country where almost 20% of the population live in poverty, Filipinos should not be further burdened by the fear of being scammed, even through the most unsuspecting ways. We owe it to our countrymen to protect them from the devious ways of scamming and to strengthen their confidence in our banking and financial institutions. I cannot just sit and do nothing while these scammers steal the hard-earned money of our kababayans. Scammers should not be given further slack to continue their opportunist activities against unwilling victims. The false promise of these scammers should be shattered by our unwavering commitment to provide a Philippines where scammers do not proliferate. Through the AFASA, we are looking forward to the future of a scam-free Philippines. Maraming salamat po sa inyong suporta.
Maraming salamat sa ating sponsor, Senator Mark Villar.
Thank you. Mr. President, may I be allowed to co-sponsor the measure, Mr.
I
President?
distinguished Majority Floor Leaders recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is my honor and privilege to co-sponsor Senate Bill number 2560 under Committee Report number 204 or the Anti-Financial Account Scamming Act. Having filed our own version of the measure, we would like to thank our distinguished colleague, the sponsor of the measure, Senator Mark Villar, for his hard work on this measure, which is one of the priority legislations of this administration. Mr. President, because of the pandemic, a huge spotlight was placed on digitalization in the conduct of everyday business. With mobility and face-to-face interactions and activities restricted, many Filipinos turn to online and digital banking methods to conduct their personal and business transactions. Dahil po dito, Ginoong Pangulo, dumoble nga po ang dami ng mga Pilipino na nagkaroon ng access sa mga bangko at iba pang electronic money channels. According to the BSP, the number of bank population was about 56% of all adults in 2021, up from just 29% in 2019. This is equivalent, Mr. President, to about 22 million Filipinos who have acquired access to formal financial accounts in just 2 years. In 2022, Mr. President, the share of Filipinos with bank accounts has further grown to 65% of the adult population. However, Mr. President, with the continued evolution of banking and electronic payment methods, fraudulent activities involving bank accounts, e-wallets, and other financial accounts have also increased. In fact, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas said that complaints related to the use of internet and mobile banking constitute 45.2% of the total complaints they received in 2021. A staggering 42,456 complaints on financial fraud, account takeover or identity theft, phishing, and other schemes were reported between 2020 and 2021. Ginoong Pangulo, nagiging sophisticado na rin po ang modus ng mga scammer para makapanloko sa kapwa-tao. Noong pong nakaraang taon, ibinahagi po ng isang Facebook user kung paano tinangkang kuhanan ng 20,000 ang tatay niya dahil umano sa maling numerong sinendan ng GCash. Ang text na natanggap ng tatay niya ay mukha talagang legit na galing po sa GCash sa unang tingin. Tapos, wala pang 1 minuto, may nag-text na sa kanya para bawiin ang 20,000 dahil nga nagkamali daw ng padala ng pera. Buti na lang, hindi nagtagumpay ang mga scammer na ito dahil nasuri agad ang peking text mula sa GCash. In addition, Mr. President, one of my own staff was scammed into buying concert tickets. She was made to believe the tickets were legitimate. Hence, she transferred money to the digital bank account of the seller, only to be blocked later by the scammer. We sought the help of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the destination bank, but unfortunately, Mr. President, the funds were already moved as soon as they were received. Madami na rin po tayong natatanggap na reklamo, Ginoong Pangulo, mula sa mga nabibiktima ng mga nagpapanggap na representative ng mga bangko na tumatawag para umano sa security updates at hihingin ang mga pribadong impormasyon ng account balance, ng account holders, gaya ng birth date, address, pangalan ng kanilang nanay at iba pa, na nagre-resulta po sa pag-take over at pag-access ng mga scammers accounts ng mga biktima. Hence, Mr. President, we firmly believe that it is time to pass this very important piece of legislation to protect consumers from falling prey to cyber criminals and criminal syndicates who target financial accounts or lure account holders into perpetrating fraudulent activities, including becoming money mules themselves. We also welcome, Mr. President, the provision under the bill that large-scale commission of these crimes shall be declared a form of economic sabotage and a heinous crime, and thus will be punishable to the maximum level allowed by our laws. Mr. President, we hope that with this measure, we will finally put a stop to the criminal activities targeting our innocent kababayans and their hard-earned money. Again, we'd like to thank the sponsor of the measure, Senator Mark Villar, and of course, our Senate President for pushing for this very important piece of legislation. We pledge our full support to the passage of this important measure. Thank you, and may God bless us all.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader. Actually, this is also a LEDAC measure.
Yes, Mr.
So,
President.
this is a priority. And to hasten the proceedings, I would just like to put on record that I'll just submit
For the record, my.
Thank you,
small
Mr.
shoes.
President. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, next to co-sponsor is the distinguished lady from Pangasinan and Iloilo, no other than our amazing grace of the Senate, Senator Grace Poe. I move that she be
Our
recognized.
distinguished colleague, Senator Grace Poe, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and also from San Juan. Mr. President,
Don't forget San Juan.
Yeah.
San Juan.
Hey, Mayor.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, it is my privilege to co-sponsor this measure born of necessity. The pandemic pushed us to rely on online financial transactions heavily. With a spike in digital transactions came a spike in fraud as well. Sinimulan na natin ang pagpapaigting ng seguridad ng mga digital transactions sa SIM Registration Act. Pero hindi ito sapat. Kaya ngayon naman, higpitan natin ang seguridad ng ating mga financial accounts tulad ng GCash, Maya Online Banks, pati mga e-wallets na mga pinakagamit na apps tulad ng Shopee, Lazada at Grab. They say that there are only two certain things in life, death and taxes. Ngayon, mukhang kinakailangan na nito ng amendment, death, taxes, and scams. These fraudulent schemes and rackets have become the bane of our financial consumers. Nitong mga nakaraang linggo lang, we heard the news of at least 120 e-wallet account holders losing their hard-earned money in an instant, apparently because of a phishing scam as reported by the Bangko Sentral. We also heard of a news report years ago when some teachers were scammed into giving away their financial details, eventually losing as much as 26,000 to 121,000 from their bank accounts. These stories and other countless reports of scams, shams, and other deceits only cement our status as a scamming hotbed in Asia. In 2022, we ranked 5th among Southeast Asian countries in terms of phishing attacks and incidents. In the same year, we lost a staggering 623 million pesos to fraud, 623 million to phishing, and 409 million to identity theft. At mas malala pa ito sa cybersecurity experts believe that these incidents would only get worse in 2024 and beyond. As principal author of this measure and as the co-sponsor and co-author of the Financial Products and Services Consumer Protection Act last Congress, this bill is part of an ongoing campaign against these scams, shams, and frauds. I first filed this bill in 2021 when e-money accounts rose to an astonishing 16.8 million as the pandemic prompted many to make the necessary transactions online. But these schemes chip away the trust in our financial system, threatening to undo years of progress in financial inclusion and digital innovation. And while financial education and literacy is still key in preventing these schemes, kinakailangan natin ng mas konkretong aksyon para habulin at parusahan itong mga manloloko at masasamang loob. I would like to thank the sponsor of this bill, Senator Mark Villar, for pushing forward for this measure. Mr. President, fellow senators, it is thus with urgency that I co-sponsor Senate Bill number 2560 under Committee Report number 204, and I earnestly ask my colleagues for the swift passage of this much-needed measure. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr.
Maraming
President.
salamat.
Mr. President, next to co-sponsor the measure is the distinguished gentleman from Valenzuela City, no other than Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. I move that he be recognized, Mr.
Our
President.
distinguished colleague from the city of Valenzuela, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise today to co-sponsor the Anti-Financial Accounting Scamming Act, which seeks to protect the integrity of our country's financial system and the security of our financial accounts from cybercriminals and scammers. One of the very visible impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic is the advancement in the use of digital financial services. Damang-dama natin ito, lalong-lalo na ang mga kababayan nating mayroon online banking, e-wallets, and digital payments. Sino ba naman ang aayaw sa kaginhawaan na idudulot nito? Ngunit sa kabilang banda, kung gaano kabilis ang pag-usbong ng digital financial services, gaano din kabilis ang galawan ng mga kawatan sa paggamit nito bilang instrumento sa pangloloko at paggawa ng krimen. This digital financial services exposes us to the risk of financial-related cybercrimes such as hacking, phishing, identity theft, and money laundering, among others. Over the years, we have witnessed many cases of innocent Filipinos losing their hard-earned money to various financial-related cybercrimes. Some of these were the Mark Nagoyo scam in 2021, where over 700 BDO Unibank customer accounts were hacked. The unauthorized bank transfers in Land Bank that victimized teachers in 2022, and the massive phishing incident involving GCash users in 2023. Mr. President, I can attest that these incidents have caused not only financial losses, but also emotional distress, anxiety, and loss of trust for financial institutions among the victims of these financial-related cybercrimes and the general public. Kung matatandaan ninyo, noong 2021, ako mismo ay nabiktima ng credit card hacking. Wala akong kamalay-malay na may kawatan na umorder sa isang food delivery platform na nagkakahalaga ng 1 milyon piso gamit ang credit card ko. Ang mga kriminal na ito ay walang kinatatakutan, walang puso, at higit sa lahat, walang konsiderasyon sa perang hindi naman nila pinaghihirapan. But above all, these cybercrimes tarnish the integrity of our financial system, which greatly affects our economy and security. Sa katunayan, ayon sa ulat ng Kaspersky Security Network, ang Pilipinas ay pang-apat sa global ranking ng mga bansa tina-target ng online threats sa taong 2023. This reality is further underscored by the fact that in 2020-2021, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas received more than 42,000 complaints from consumers who fell victim to financial fraud. Tunay na nakababahala na sa kasagsagan ng pandemya kung kailan napakarami sa ating mga kababayan ang nawalan ng hanapbuhay, ay libo-libong Pilipino rin ang nabiktima ng iba't ibang scams. Ginoong Pangulo, sa patuloy na pakikipaglaro ng mga kriminal, napapanahon na upang mabitag natin sila gamit ang pangil ng batas. This is why we need the Anti-Financial Accounts Scamming Act. This bill establishes clear and severe penalties for those who willingly act as money mules, those who use social engineering schemes and other fraudulent means to solicit financial account information that may result to account takeover or loss to any person. Acknowledging the deleterious effect of these fraudulent activities on the economy, this bill declares the large-scale commission of punishable acts as a form of economic sabotage and heinous crime punishable to the maximum level allowed by law. Napapanahon ang probisyong ito ng panukalang batas upang matugunan ang mga puwang sa mga umiiral na batas kaugnay sa digital financial services. In addition to penalizing fraudulent acts involving financial accounts, this proposed measure also highlights the greater responsibilities of the responsible institutions, specifically the banks, non-banks, and other financial institutions and service providers in ensuring that their clients' financial accounts are protected through adequate risk management systems and controls. Dito ay klarong binibigyan diin ang kanilang pananagutan na maprotektahan ang mga account ng kanilang mga kliyente mula sa anumang uri ng panloloko. Before I end, allow me to express my gratitude to the sponsor of this bill, Senator Mark Villar, and to my fellow co-authors for their unyielding commitment to championing the cause behind this proposed measure. Ang pagpasa ng panukalang ito ay isang mahalagang hakbang sa pagpapanatili ng kaayusan ng ating ekonomiya at ng ating lipunan. Isa itong babala sa mga kriminal, isang babala na tuldukan na nila ang panluloko sa ating mga kababayan at sa ating bansa. Thank you very much, Mr. President, esteemed colleagues.
Thank you very much, Senator Gatchalian.
Mr. President, next to co-sponsor the measure is the distinguished gentleman from the great province of Cavite, no other than Senator Ramon Bong Revilla Jr. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Our distinguished colleague from the great province of Cavite, Senator Ramon Bong Revilla Jr. is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, I rise today to co-sponsor Senate Bill number 2560, which seeks to provide protection mechanisms from various cybercrime schemes perpetrated by online scammers through regulation of the use of bank accounts and e-wallets. I laud our sponsor, Senator Mark Villar, for shepherding this priority measure of the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council, LEDAC, which ultimately aims to preserve public trust in digital finance. Masakit, masaklap, nakakapanlumo na maging biktima at maperwisyo ng mga online modus, lalo na sa panahon ng napakahirap na buhay, Mr. President. Hindi na po mabilang ang mga halos na simot ang mga digital wallets dahil sa mga financial scam. Yung mga isinusubi ng kakaunting kinikita para sana sa mga pangunahing mga bayarin, madalas naglalaho dahil sa mga manloloko na ito. Mismong Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas na rin ang nagdiin na malawak ang pinsalang dulot, dulot ng mga financial scam na ito. Parang ang apoy na tumutupok sa pera at kabuhayan ng mga walang muwang na Pilipino, Ginoong Pangulo. Higit 1 bilyong piso ang posibleng na-scam na sa phishing o nakawan ng online identity. Napakaraming modus ang naglipa na at napakarami na ring mga kawawang na biktima na kadalasan ay walang laban sa talim ng panloloko. Kaya naman, ang mga kawawa nating kababayan ay naiiwang patuloy na umaasa na kahit paano ay maibalik ang nakulimbat mula sa kanilang mga walang pusong kawatan. Sometimes we tend to become so reliant on the convenience of technology and digitalization that we easily fall prey to scams. Ito ay pinapatunayan din ng ulat ng PNP na nakasaad na tumaas ng 68.98% ang naitalang cybercrime sa Pilipinas kumpara noong taong 2023. Sa kabila ng pagbaba ng bilang ng focus crimes, napakalaki naman ng itinaas ng cybercrimes. Ako po mismo, Ginoong Pangulo, nakakatanggap ng mga parehong sumbong. Noong nakaraang taon, marin kong pinaalalahanan ang NTC at GCash na mas maging maigting sa kanilang mga hakbang upang hindi na mabiktima ang ganitong uri ng scam ang ating mga kababayan. Patuloy po tayong magtulungan upang magsulong ng mga polisiya upang maprotektahan natin ang integridad ng ating financial system. I urge our colleagues to support the immediate passage of this measure. And with the permission of the sponsor, may I be made co-author of this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Revilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, to allow our colleagues to study further the measure, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2560 under Committee Report number 204. And before you act on the motion, Mr. President, may I also put on record that Senator Estrada would just like to insert into the records his co-sponsorship speech.
Thank you very much. So we take
For the
we
previous
take
motion,
note,
Mr.
we take note of that. There be no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2492. This is the bill on the Philippine Maritime Zones Act. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we are now in the period of individual amendments, and with the consent of the body, I move that we resume the period of individual amendments using the clean copy of the bill as of February 20, 2024 as our working draft. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this juncture, I move that we recognize the sponsor of the measure, Senator Francis Tol Tolentino, and to introduce his individual amendments, Senator Robin Hood Padilla. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved. We'd like to recognize Senator Tolentino, the sponsor of the measure, and to interpolate, or rather propose amendments is Senator Robin Hood Padilla.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo at sa ating pinunong mayorya. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bismillahi wassalatu wassalamu Allah Rasulillahi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Isang magandang hapon po, lalong-lalo na po sa aking hinahangaan at masasabi ko pong isa sa aking advisor, Senator Tol Tolentino. Isang magandang hapon po sa inyo.
Magandang hapon po, ginagalang na kapatid, Senator Robin Hood Padilla.
Ako po ay manggagaling doon po sa ating huling pag-uusap patungkol po sa aming hinihingi. Ito po ay napakahalaga sa mga matatawag po natin na tunay na kayamanan ng ating bansa sapagkat tayo po ay may kultura. At kapag pinag-usapan ang kultura, kasama po dyan ang teritoryo, pag-aari, at kasaysayan. Hindi po pwede na magkaroon ng isang kultura na walang kasaysayan at walang pag-aari. Ito pong usapin ng Saba. Isang bagay po ito na humahamon sa gobyerno. Sapagkat sinasabi po ng kasaysayan na itong Saba, atin po ito. Hindi po ito usapin ng kinuha lang natin sa isang lugar at sinabi ko dito. Hindi po, meron po itong historical background. At ito po ay may mga ebidensya galing pa sa kaharian ng Espanya at masasabing panahon ng Amerikano. At ito din po ay pinatunayan noong panahon na ang Pangulo ng Pilipinas ay si Diosdado Macapagal. Sapagkat nung nagkaroon po ng sinasabing Federation of Malaysia, nag-react ang Pilipinas sapagkat isinama ang Sabah, ang North Borneo. Kaya po nagkaroon tayo ng claim noong 1962. Ang hindi po natin maintindihan ay dumating ang 1968, panahon po ni Presidente Marcos Sr., tayo po ay gumawa ng batas. Ito po yung Republic Act 5446 na ang sinasabi sa Section 2, the definition of the baselines of the territorial sea of the Philippine archipelago as provided in this act is without prejudice to the delineation of the baselines of the territorial sea around the territory of Sabah, situated in North Borneo, over which the Republic of the Philippines has acquired dominion and sovereignty. Napakaganda po nito, napakaliwanag po nito. Noong 1982, nagkaroon po ng UNCLOS. Mas maipapaliwanag po ng ating mahal na kasama at hinahanga ang teacher ko, si Senator Tol Tolentino. Ano nga po ba yung ibig sabihin ng UNCLOS po? United Nations on
Law of the Sea.
Law of the Sea. Yan. Na-approve po yan noong 1982. Noong 1986, pagkatapos po ng revolution, nagkaroon po tayo ng 1987 Constitution. Doon po sa 1987 Constitution, hindi po natin maintindihan kung bakit yung historical nawala doon sa konstitusyon natin. Napalitan po yan, nanahimik yung patungkol po sa sinasabing historical rights. At hindi lang po yun, nagkaroon pa ng seksyon na nawala na ang mga royalties sa Pilipinas. Wala na ho tayong mga sultan. Nawala pa hong Pilipinas, wala pa hong mga Espanyol dito sa atin, meron na ho tayong mga sultan. Nawala po yan noong 1987 Constitution. Pati po yung historical rights sa pag-aari. Ngayon po, noong 2008, dumating po yung Republic Act 9522. Dito po sa Republic Act 9522, naging napakatahimik po nito sa usapin ng Sabah. Pero hindi po ibig sabihin na tinatalikuran po ito dahil sinabi mismo ng Supreme Court na naninindigan ang Supreme Court na meron tayong claim dyan na Sabah. Ngayon, ang akin pong hinihingi, bakit po kaya ito po ay sa usapin po ito ng itong ginagawa natin na ito, itong baseline na ito, itong pag-aamenda natin, ito pong panukala po nyo na ito. Hinihingi po namin na huwag tumahimik itong panukala na ito patungkol po dito sa Sabah. Sapagkat mahirap pong tanggapin, Ako lang po, personal ko ito. At alam ko, yan din ang nararamdaman ng ating mga kapatid na tinatawag nating stateless ngayon. Dahil sa dami ng mga refugee daw, hindi ko alam bakit tinawag na refugee, kababayan natin yun, na magmula diyan sa Sabah, ay pwersahang inilikas at ibinalik sa Sulu. Ang hindi po natin maintindihan ay bakit hindi natin makuha yung mismong suporta ng gobyerno kung paano ang binibigay na suporta ng gobyerno diyan sa West Philippine Sea, parehas lang tayong merong claim. At itong ang kaibahan, historical ito, meron itong mga patotoo, meron itong mga papeles, meron itong mga dokumento galing pa sa Espanyol, sa Amerikano, sabihin nyo na lahat kung anong gusto nyong ebidensya. 1982 lang yung UNCLOS. Hindi ko po sinasabi na wag natin kilalanin yung UNCLOS. Kilalanin po natin yan. Pero wag natin din kalimutan yung mga ibang treaty na nagpapalakas sa ating claim. Hindi po natin maintindihan. Hindi ko po sinasabi, sapagkat kung meron pong isang tao dito na naniniwala ako na nagmamalasakit sa claim ng mga Muslim dyan sa Sabah, ay si Senator Tolentino. Siya nga nagbigay sa akin ng lecture dyan. Ang dami niya dyan, ebidensya. Ang hinihingi lang po natin ay magkaroon tayo ng pantay na atensyon. Sapagkat sovereignty po ang Sabah, ang claim natin sa Sabah ay sovereignty. Hindi ko po sinasabi na awayin natin ang Malaysia. Wala po akong ganung intensyon. Wala po akong kahit na sinong kaibigan nating bansa ang awayin. Ang sinasabi ko lamang po, dapat sa ating local laws, sa ating mga pansariling batas, dapat ay matibay ang ating paninindigan na sa atin ang Sabah. Kung paano natin pinaglalaban na atin ang 200 nautical miles na sovereignty rights natin, ganun din natin ipaglaban ang sovereignty. Ang gobyerno natin sinabi, inclusive. Property ito, pag-aari ito ng mga Muslim na hindi nila inagaw, kanila to. Pag-aari nila to. Simple lamang po ang alam kong maiintindihan ng aking kaibigan, itong aking amendment. Hindi po ito magiging kalabisan sapagkat tayo po reasonableng tao din, naiintindihan natin kung ano ang diplomacy. Naiintindihan po natin kung ano ang relasyon ng dalawang bansa at pwede silang mag-usap. Pero hindi po yan dapat maging hadlang para magkaroon tayo ng mga sarili nating batas dito sa ating bayan. Dito po sana, kung pwede po, kung nanaisin po ng ating mahal na kapatid, teacher, Senator Tolentino, maaari po ba akong magbigay ng aking amendment?
Mahal na Pangulo, tayo po ay pumapayag, sumasang-ayon sa pagbibigay ng amendments o pag-amyenda. Ito po ay karapatan ng ating ginagalang na kapatid. Subalit kung pagbibigyan po ninyo akong makatugon ng ilang kabanata, palagay ko po mas lalong liliwanag po ang ating usapin, lalong-lalo na sa mga nakikinig sa ngayon, kung pahintulutan.
Opo.
Alam niyo po, mahal na Pangulo, wala po tayong dito sa batas natin ngayon, sa saligang batas, sa nabanggit na UNCLOS kanina, wala po tayong ibinigay na wala, hindi kinikilalang pag-aari, maging bahagi man ito ng makasaysayang pag-aari, maging bahagi man ito ng Tratado ng Paris o Tratado ng Washington noong mga nakaraang panahon. Ito po lahat ay naandyan, mahal na Pangulo. Dangan nga lamang na hindi ganon kabigkas ang mga katagang batas patungkol dito dahil nabanggit na rin ng ating mahal na kapatid buhat sa Nueva Ecija at sa Bicol na ang mundo ngayon ay kumikilala sa mga diplomatikong pag-uusap kung saan bilang kabahagi ng isang malaking rehiyon, halimbawa po ang ASEAN, ay tayo po ay may mga lingwaheng ginagamit na hindi nakakakuha ng masasakit, nagdudulot ng masasakit na damdamin o dili kaya ay magdudulot ng isang hindi kanais-nais na kabanatang diplomatiko, mahal na Pangulo. Gusto ko lamang pong banggitin na wala pong nabago sa ating pag-aari, sa ating kinikilalang sariling bahagi ng ating kapuluan, simula doon sa mga dating saligang batas hanggang sa ngayon, mahal na Pangulo. At gusto ko pong idagdag natin na tama, meron pong mga batas kung saan nakalagay yung nabanggit ng ating kapatid patungkol sa Sabah. Ito po yung Republic Act 5446 na binanggit niya kanina, Section 2. At bukod po doon, Mr. President, nakikita po natin nung tayo po ay nagkaroon ng interpellation at ito rin ating kapatid, ang ating nakapaliwanagan, ay atin pong pinaliwanag ng mariin yung katagang, and I quote, all other territories over which the Philippines has sovereignty or jurisdiction, unquote, would refer probably to that portion of North Borneo. So yung atin pong Article 1 ng ating saligang batas, kung idadagdag natin yung Section 2 ng Republic Act 5446 na hanggang sa ngayon po ay umiiral, ay magpapatunay na wala po tayong iniiwanan, tinatalikdan at hindi na sinusulong na pag-aari patungkol po doon sa nabanggit ng ating mahal na kapatid. At magpapatunay po dito ang napakaraming kataga na nagbuhat sa kagalang-galang at kataas-taasang Korte Suprema kung saan doon po sa kaso ng Magallona versus Ermita ay sinabi, and I quote in English, yung ruling po ng Supreme Court, ang sinabi po nila ay the definition of the baselines, and I quote, the definition of the baselines of the territorials of the Philippine archipelago as provided for in this act is without prejudice to the delineation of the territorial sea around the territory of Sabah, etc., etc. Ibig sabihin po, yung ruling ng Supreme Court is that it keeps open the door for drawing of the baseline. So wala po sa kasalukuyan, wala po tayong winawaglit, isinasa isang tabi, inalagay sa ilalim ng isang aparador, sa loob ng aparador. Buhay po lahat yan. Ang batas po natin ay buhay. At gusto ko pong kumuha sa isang talata, kasi po sa mahal na Pangulo, doon po sa UNCLOS, nung nilagdaan po ito. At ang isa po sa lumagda ay dating Secretary of Foreign Affairs, dating miyembro din po ng Senado, si Senator Arturo Tolentino. Sa UNCLOS po ay bawal po magkaroon ng isang reservation. Ang ginawa po ni Senator Tolentino ay gumawa po siya ng parang declaration or understanding. At ang nakalagay po doon sa declaration, pang-apat na talata in English, number 4, such signing, I'm now referring to the signing of the accession to the UNCLOS, such signing shall not in any manner impair or prejudice the sovereignty of the Republic of the Philippines over any territory over which it exercises sovereign authority, such as, binanggit po dito, yung Kalayaan Islands and the waters appurtenant thereto. Meaning to say that even when we signed UNCLOS, we never gave up, we never abandoned our claims, Mr. President. So, tama po ang ating ginagalang na kapatid na sa ginagawa niyang pagbibigkas ng kanyang salubin. Subalit gusto ko pong idagdag at bigyan ng diin na wala pong pagbabago. It has been there. It will remain there. It is part of our history. It is part of our culture. It is part of our legal regime. It is part of the international agreement we entered into called UNCLOS, and it has been recognized, UNCLOS, our membership in UNCLOS has been recognized by the entire diplomatic community. So it's there, Mr. President. Wala po tayo, maging sa batas na ating binabalangkas ngayon, ay wala po tayong inaabandona. Subalit, meron lamang mga kataga na hindi natin na ilalagay, sang-ayon na rin sa mga kasunduang ating pinasukan na lalong-lalo na yung United Nations Charter kung saan lahat po ng resolutions ng conflict should be settled under the provisions provided for by the United Nations Charter, which would refer to peaceful settlement and negotiations without derogating Philippine sovereignty. Yun lamang po ang may dadagdag ko sa bilang tugon sa pananaw na ginagalang natin ng ating kapatid na buhat sa Nueva Ecija at sa rehiyon ng Bicol, Mr. President. Salamat po, mahal na kapatid, Senator Padilla.
Maraming salamat po.
Mahaba yung explanation ng ating professor.
Opo,
Please proceed. Please proceed.
napakaganda po ng kanyang masasabi ko pong another lecture from the teacher, Senator Tolentino. Napakaganda po. Alam niyo po, ito po ay tatanawin na utang na loob sa inyo ng marami nating mga kapatid sapagkat matagal po talaga, matagal na po namin inaantay na magkaroon uli ng batas na magbibigay ng lakas ng loob sa ating mga kapatid na nandyan pa rin ang gobyerno ng Pilipinas at kakampi nila. Ito po yung aking amendment. Handa na po bang pakinggan ng ating teacher?
Buong pagbubukas po ng kaisipan, damdamin at puso ang aking magiging paghahanda.
Isang Babaysihano at isang Batanggenyo ang nagtatagalugan dito, mahal na Pangulo. Ito na po. On page 6, dito po sa inyo pong panukala, page 6.
And I think, Mr. President, we have the same clean copy dated February 20, 2024,
Yes.
coming from the Secretariat. Page 6.
Opo.
Yes, Your Honor.
Lines 23 to 25, section 19,
Section 19.
amend the last paragraph to read as follows. All other laws, comma, presidential decrees, comma, executive orders, comma, rules and regulations, comma, proclamations, comma, and other issuances, comma, inconsistent with or contrary to the provisions of this act are deemed amended or repealed accordingly, colon, provided that nothing in this act shall be construed as repealing Section 2 of Republic Act Number 5446 as amended by Republic Act Number 9522 or an act to define the baselines of the territorial sea of the Philippines.
Can we, Mr. President, can we hear again the last line? The title of Republic Act 9522 was mentioned. What about Republic Act 5446?
Basahin ko po ulit.
Opo.
Apo. Ito po yung idinagdag namin, mahal na Senator Tolentino. Pagkatapos po ng colon, provided that nothing in this act shall be construed as repealing Section 2 of Republic Act Number 5446, comma, as amended by Republic Act Number 9522 or an act to define the baselines of the territorial sea of the Philippines.
Period.
Period.
Mr. President, can I ask for a minute suspension?
Session suspended. Resume.
Mr. President, may I ask from the good gentleman the exact, if we can place it, spread it on the records, the exact wording, just the exact wording for our historical legislative records, Mr. President, the exact wording of Section 2 of Republic Act 5446, Mr. President. Pakibasa po siguro yung
Apo.
kung ano po yung Section 2 ng Republic Act 5446 na gusto nyong kahit hindi po ilagay yung buong section, yung pangalan, yung nilalaman po ng Section 2 5446.
Opo, mahal na Pangulo. Ang sabi po dito sa Republic Act number 5446, Section 2, the definition of the baselines of the territorial sea of the Philippine archipelago as provided in this act is without prejudice to the delineation of baselines of the territorial sea around the territory of Sabah, situated in North Borneo, over which the Republic of the Philippines has acquired dominion and sovereignty. Yun po yung nasa RA 5446. Sa Tagalog po, ang kahulugan ng mga baseline ng territorial sea ng Philippine Archipelago, gaya ng sinasaad sa batas na ito, ay hindi makahadlang sa delineasyon ng mga baseline ng territorial sea sa paligid ng teritoryo ng Sabah na matatagpuan sa North Borneo, kung saan ang Republika ng Pilipinas ay nakakuha ng kapangyarihan at soberenya.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, since mention was made by the good gentleman from Nueva Ecija and the Bicol region of Republic Act 9522. This representation, Mr. President, would probably be amenable to a modified version of his proposed amendment. I am particularly highlighting Section 2 of Republic Act 9522. And if I will may be allowed to read now, Section 2 of Republic Act 9522, which is the act that amended the law previously cited by the good gentleman from Nueva Ecija, refers to, and I quote Section 2, the baselines in the following areas over which the Philippines likewise exercises sovereignty and jurisdiction shall be determined as regime of islands, quote unquote, and under the Republic of the Philippines, consistent with Article 121 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, colon, letter A, the Kalayaan Island Group as constituted under Presidential Decree 1596 and Bajo de Masinloc, also known as the Scarborough Shoal, Mr. President. Ang counter-proposal ko po rito, Mr. President, kung atin pong ilalagay ang Republic Act 5, Section 2, 5446, ay ilagay na rin natin po ang Kalayaan Island Group at ang Bajo de Masinloc o Scarborough Shoal na nakasaad po sa Section 2 na Republic Act 9552. Para na sa ganun po ay mas maliwanag, Mr. President, dito sa repealing clause. Mr. President, can I ask for a minute suspension?
Session suspended. Zoom.
Mr. President, as proposed by the gentleman from Nueva Ecija and Bicol region, Mr. President, this representation is amenable to the amendment, subject to a modification, which should now read as follows. Instead of a colon, instead of a colon from the repealing clause, add a semicolon and then the following phrase, provided that nothing in this act shall be construed as repealing Section 2 of Republic Act 5446 and Section 2 of Republic Act 9522, subject to style, Mr. President. If the proponent would be amenable to that, that would be acceptable to this representation, because it will be more expansive and broad to include our interests as contained in the arbitral ruling, Mr. President.
Mahal na Pangulo, 9522 Section 2, ang baseline sa mga sumusunod na lugar kung saan ginagamit din ng Pilipinas ang soberenya at jurisdiksyon ay dapat ipasaya bilang rehime ng mga isla sa ilalim ng Republika ng Pilipinas, sang-ayon sa Artikulo 121 ng United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Ang Kalayaan Island Group na binuo sa ilalim ng Presidential Decree number 1596 at Baho di Masinloc na kilala rin bilang Scarborough Shoal. Mahal na Pangulo, isa pong kaligayahan para sa akin ang makasama po ito sa aking amenda sapagkat ito po ay tunay na talaga pong ang ating mahal na kaibigan at teacher na si Senator Tol Tolentino ay talagang pinoproteksyonan ang teritoryo ng Pilipinas sa usapin na ito na nakasama ito sa aking amenda. Napakagandang balita po nito. Tinatanggap ko po ito, mahal na Pangulo.
Mr. President, to limit the confusion of our stenographers here, let me rephrase with the indulgence of Senator Padilla, Your Honor, let me rephrase the new last sentence of the repealing clause. All other laws, presidential decrees, executive orders, rules and regulations, proclamations, and other issuances inconsistent with or contrary to the provisions of this act are deemed amended or repealed accordingly, semicolon, provided that nothing in this act shall be construed as repealing Section 2 of Republic Act 5446 and Section 2 of Republic Act 9522. Period.
Mr. President, 1 minute suspension lang.
Session suspended. Indeed, Republic Act 5446 was already amended. Portion was amended by Republic Act 9552. So it will now be worded as this. After, on line 25, after the words repealed accordingly, semicolon, add the phrase, provided that nothing in this act shall be construed as repealing Section 2 of Republic Act 5, number 5446 as amended, and Section 2 of Republic Act 9522. Is that the correct version? From my impression, Your Honor?
Opo, ito po ay malugod at masaya ko pong tinatanggap. I accept.
So, Mr. President, there is a confluence of legislative intention here, and as rewarded, we so move for the amendment, Mr. President.
So, you hereby accept, is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Salamat.
Session suspended.
We recognize the distinguished sponsor of the measure, Senator Francis Tolentino, Mr. President.
Senator Tolentino is recognized.
Mr. President, we're in the period of amendments, and we suspended this, and I think the minority leader has the floor.
Minority Floor Leader Pimentel is recognized.
Yes, thank you for recognizing this representation, Mr. President. Parang pahabol na, Mr. President. On page 2, lines 10 to 11, which involve section 4, I propose that we delete the phrase as appropriate, as well as the 2 commas, Mr. President, which precede and also end the phrase, Mr. President. So therefore, the introductory sentence for section 4 will read as follows: the internal waters of the Philippines shall refer to the following, colon, Mr. President. I so move, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I accept, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. And since this refers to the internal waters of the Philippines, Mr. President, may we get clarification from the sponsor if it is already clear that when we use internal waters in the bill or in the law, this refers to the internal waters as UNCLOS terminology, Mr. President, not in the concept of internal waters in our constitutional usage, specifically on Article 1 on national territory, Mr. President. Just a clarification, Mr. President.
I totally agree, Mr. President, that when the 1997 Constitution was crafted and the words internal waters included, no definition was made as to the exact meaning of internal waters. And as we speak today, Mr. President, there is no single domestic law which would define clearly the meaning of internal waters, Mr. President. But for purposes, I totally agree, Mr. President, that constitutional definition is different from the definition provided for under this act, which is more embedded with the provisions of UNCLOS, Mr. President. But I just want to add, for purposes of clarity and legislative history, the exact wordings made by Senator Arturo Tolentino when he made the declaration in 1982, and this is contained in number 7 of his declaration, Mr. President, and I quote, "The concept of archipelagic waters is similar to the concept of internal waters under the Constitution of the Philippines," and is referring to the 1973, because this was 1982, "and removes straits connecting these waters with the economic zone or high sea from the rights of foreign vessel to transit passage for international navigation," unquote. So just to make this a clear component of our legislative debates for purposes of statutory constructions, future law students, and perhaps even the Supreme Court would probably glean our very tedious interpellation so far and debates, Mr. President. I totally agree. Different concept insofar as constitutional meaning of internal waters. What happened? Different concept insofar as constitutional meaning is concerned from the act that we are trying to produce right now, which is really anchored on the concept of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. I totally agree, Mr. President.
We needed to engage in this discussion, Mr. President, because the phrase used is the same. The phrase is internal waters. So there is a constitutional concept which is found in Article 1, National Territory of the 1987 Constitution, but the same phrase is used in our bill. But at least klaro tayo, as explained by our sponsor, that internal waters as used in our bill is in the UNCLOS sense, Mr. President. But it does not in any way also diminish our national territory called internal waters because, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. President, our internal waters in the constitutional sense would equal, may mathematical terminology, would equal internal waters and archipelagic waters in our bill, Mr. President, more or less.
More or less,
More
more
or
or
less,
less,
yeah po.
more or less. And in the same manner, we exercise full sovereignty and jurisdiction over both.
Over both, yes.
Mr. President.
Yes, thank you for that, Mr. President. Waters as referred to in our Constitution. Wala po. Wala. At any rate, Mr. President, Article 1 refers to territory. Our bill refers to maritime zones. Okay. Magkaiba po. Thank you, Mr. President.
Totally agree, Mr. President.
Thank you for clarifying that issue, Minority Leader and distinguished sponsor. Mr. President, if I may, would just like to introduce an amendment, last but not the least, Mr. President, anterior amendment on page 3, line 7, between the words "the" and "features," insert the words "high tide," Mr. President. So the sentence shall now read, "The high tide features covered by the Kalayaan Island Group in the West Philippine Sea shall have a territorial sea of 12 nautical miles from its baselines as determined above." I submit to the wisdom of the sponsor, Your Honor.
Mr. President, the proposed amendment is consistent with the 2016 arbitral ruling, as well as the provisions of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Therefore, this representation interposes no objections.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. And with that, no other member of the Senate would introduce any individual amendments. So I move now to close the period of individual amendments. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
4-minute suspension, Mr.
Session
President.
suspended.
Resume.
Mr. President, at this juncture and with the consent of the body, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 2492, subject to style. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Senate Bill number 2492 is approved on second reading.
Thank you, Mr. President.
But Mr. President,
And we thank the gentleman from Tagaytay City, Senator Francis Tolentino, for working very hard, double time, Mr. President, in this particular measure. I now move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2492.
Motion, is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that, and with the consent of the body, I move that we transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders, Committee Report number 200 on House Concurrent Resolution number 19, Committee Report number 201 on House Concurrent Resolution number 20, Committee Report number 202 on House Concurrent Resolution number 21, and Committee Report number 203 on House Concurrent Resolution number 22. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we consider House Concurrent Resolution numbers 19, 20, 21, and 22 under Committee Report numbers 200, 201, 202, and 203 respectively. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measures?
House Concurrent Resolution number 19, concurrent resolution concurring with Proclamation number 403 of the President of the Republic of the Philippines, dated November 2022-23, entitled Granting Amnesty to Members of the Revolutionaryong Partido ng Manggagawa ng Pilipinas, Revolutionary Proletarian Army, Alex Bongkayaw Brigade, who have committed crimes punishable under the revised penal code and special penal laws in furtherance of their political beliefs. Concurrent resolution concurring with Proclamation number 404 of the President of the Republic of the Philippines, dated November 22, 2023, entitled Granting Amnesty to Former Members of the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army National Democratic Front, who have committed crimes punishable under the revised penal code and special penal laws in furtherance of their political beliefs. Concurrent resolution concurring with Proclamation number 405 of the President of the Republic of the Philippines, dated November 22, 2023, entitled Granting Amnesty to Members of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front who have committed crimes punishable under the revised penal code and special penal laws in furtherance of their political beliefs. And concurrent resolution concurring with Proclamation number 406 of the President of the Republic of the Philippines, dated November 22, 2023, entitled Granting Amnesty to Members of the Moro National Liberation Front who have committed crimes punishable under the revised penal code and special penal laws in furtherance of their political beliefs.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this juncture and with the consent of the body, I move to recognize the sponsor of the measure, Senator Jinggoy Ejercito Estrada, the chairperson of the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation, to deliver an omnibus sponsorship speech.
Our distinguished colleague from San Juan, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Payapa at panatag na buhay sa bawat Pilipino. This noble objective is enshrined in our Constitution and lies at the heart of every policy decision of the national government, including the Senate. This is the aim of our long-term development plans that shapes our priority legislative agenda. Also, the silencing of guns, an end to warfare, and the cessation of hostilities serve as the bedrock of prosperity and economic growth. With that, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, as your chairperson of the Senate Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation, I have the distinct honor to sponsor 4 committee reports numbered 200, 201, 202, and 203, which are in line with the collective aspiration of the Filipino people for a peaceful and united nation. Our committee reports respectfully recommend the adoption of House Concurrent Resolutions 19, 20, 21, and 22, concurring with Presidential Proclamations 403, 404, 405, and 406, respectively. The said proclamations grant amnesty to, number 1, the members of the Revolutionaryong Partido ng Manggagawa ng Pilipinas, Revolutionary Proletarian Army, and the Alex Bongcayao Brigade. Number two, the former members of the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, National Democratic Front. Number three, the members of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. And number four, the members of the Moro National Liberation Front. Through the years, Philippine presidents have exercised their power to grant executive qualified individuals towards the advancement of reconciliation and in pursuit of social cohesion. Under the 1987 Constitution, this presidential power is tempered by the requirement to seek the approval of the legislature by requiring the concurrence of a majority of all the members of Congress to take full effect. Of course, we have to vote separately, ha? May importante yan. Hence, this representation humbly seeks the support of this august chamber to allow the members of rebel groups and those who have been entangled in armed conflicts to be reintegrated into mainstream society and welcome them back into the folds of the law. As in other jurisdictions around the world, amnesty has also been judiciously wielded as an instrument of healing and to express sincerity and commitment of the national government towards the completion of the implementation of peace agreements. And the amnesty program is an integral component of the Philippine government's normalization program and comprehensive peace efforts. In particular, number one, the 2014 Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro, which concluded 17 years of negotiations between the Philippine government and the MILF. Number two, the 1996 Final Peace Agreement with the MNLF, which serves part of the full implementation of the 1976 Tripoli Agreement. Number three, the peace agreement with the RPA-ABB, which was signed in December 2000 during the administration of my father, former President Joseph Estrada, and its 2019 clarificatory implementing document. And last, Executive Order Number 70, Series of 2018, the Enhanced Comprehensive Local Integration Program, an amnesty program for the CPP, NPA, and NDF. Mr. President, the amnesty is granted to rebels who have committed crimes in pursuit of their political beliefs, including but not limited to the following: rebellion or insurrection, sedition, illegal assembly, direct and indirect assault, resistance and disobedience to a person in authority, illegal possession of firearms, ammunition or explosives, provided that these crimes or offenses were committed in furtherance of, incident to, or in connection with the crimes of rebellion or insurrection, among others. As provided under Section 4 of each presidential proclamation, the amnesty shall extinguish any criminal liability of former rebels for acts committed in pursuit of political beliefs. It shall also restore civil and political rights suspended or lost by virtue of criminal conviction. But more than that, to quote Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., Presidential Advisor on Peace, Reconciliation, and Unity, who himself was a beneficiary of amnesty during the Ramos administration as a former rebel. Amnesty creates a path toward their full transformation and enables them to return to mainstream society. Amnesty will be the key to building a better and brighter future for themselves, their families, and their communities. To be clear, the proclamations provide that amnesty shall not be granted to those who have already been proscribed or those charged under the Human Security Act of 2007 and the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. Moreover, amnesty granted shall not cover kidnap for ransom, massacre, rape, terrorism, crimes committed against chastity, crimes committed for personal ends, violation of the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, grave violations of the Geneva Convention of 1949, as well as genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, torture, enforced disappearance, and other gross violations of human rights. Ngunit hindi po basta pinagkakaloob ang amnestiya. Ginoong Pangulo, sasailalim po sa proseso ng aplikasyon ang mga nagnanais makatanggap nito. Pangungunahan ng National Amnesty Commission at mga local amnesty boards ang masusing vetting process. Katuwang ang iba't ibang ahensya ng pamahalaan, kabilang ang Philippine National Police, Armed Forces of the Philippines, National Bureau of Investigation upang masiguro na kwalipikado sila na gawaran ng amnestiya. Sa isinasagawang pagdinig ng inyong komite, inaasang 2,000 kasapi ng MNLF at 1,200 miyembro ng RPMP, RPA, ABB ang mag-apply sa programang ito. Samantala, ayon sa OPA-PRO, 4 na lang MILF combatants na may mga kinakaharap na kaso ang nag-apply na at tinatayang darami pa ito. Gayun din, mula sa 39,000 surrenderies at nag-withdraw ng suporta sa CPP, NPA, NDF, kasalukuyan meron 200 at 70 individual ang may pending cases at inaasahan mag-avail ng amnesty. For its part, the defense establishment throws its full support to the congressional concurrence to these amnesty proclamations as these are testaments to the commitment of the current administration to sustaining the gains in our internal security and stability. The same offers an invaluable opportunity for our brothers and sisters to transform their lives, gain access to government socio-economic services, and rebuild their lives. Ginoong Pangulo, mga kasamang mambabatas, bagong buhay at bagong pag-asa para sa mga dating revolusyonaryo at itinuturing na kalaban ng pamahalaan ang hatid ng pag-aproba ng mataas na kapulungan sa isinusulong nating amnesty program. Isang mahalagang hakbang din ito upang wakasan ang karahasan at maraming taon ng labanan sa pagitan ng kapwa natin Pilipino. Panghuli, isang positibong pagkilos ito tungo sa pagpapanatili ng kapayapaan at pagpapatibay ng pagkakabuklod-buklod sa ating minamahal na bansa. Dahil sa mga magandang may dudulot nito, masasabi natin, amnesty is the best policy. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, amnesty is the best policy. Mr. President, just to put on record how important these measures are that we are in consideration right now, Mr. President, we still have with us our friends from OPAPRO, DILG, DND. Secretary Galvez is still here with us. Attorney Gwen Pimentel Gana is with us. We continue to put into the records how we appreciate. The minority leader keeps on bugging me and saying she's the younger sister, Mr. President, of the minority leader. Of course, Mr. President, we'd like to put into the records that we appreciate their presence here, and we thank the gentleman from the city of San Juan for sponsoring these very timely and important measures. But to allow our colleagues to, Mr. President, before I suspend the deliberation, Mr. President, the Deputy Minority Leader is seeking the floor. I move that she be recognized, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Senator Risa Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat, Mr. President. Just briefly, as a long-time peace advocate in the peace movement and also a member of previous government peace negotiating panels, in particular with the CPP, NPA, NDF. Ipagpapasalamat ko po sa good sponsor kung maaari nila akong ituring na co-sponsor dito sa lahat ng kanilang mga amnesty bills. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Let it be placed on record that the sponsor is nodding his head, Mr. President. And the answer is in the affirmative. With that, Mr. President, to allow our colleagues to study further the measure, I move that we suspend consideration of House Concurrent Resolution numbers 19, 20, 21, and 22. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2386 under Committee Report number 99. This bill pertains to the Real Property Valuation and Assessment Act. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, resumption of consideration of Senate Bill number 2386 is now in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we have closed the period of interpellations and debate. And so with that, I move to open the period of amendments.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, with no committee amendments, I move to open the period of individual amendments and recognize the distinguished sponsor of the measure, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. So move, Mr. President.
Our sponsor, Senator Win Gatchalian, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, I truly agree with Senator Jinggoy Estrada that amnesty is the best policy. But in our case, we will be granting real property tax amnesty, a different form of amnesty. But that will be an amendment later on, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, allow me to allow me to proceed with my amendments on Senate Bill number 2386 under Committee Report 99. So on Section 2, Declaration of Policy, on page 1, line 7, delete the words internationally accepted and replace it with the word international. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 4, Section 3, definition of terms. On page 4, delete lines 3 to 8, referring to subsection I and J, and renumber accordingly. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
Still on page 4, line 11, delete the word evaluation and replace it with the phrase in the evaluation. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, amendment is approved.
On section 3, definition, on page 5, section 3, definition of terms, on page 5, line 1, before the word property, insert the word real. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 5, line 2, delete the words date of. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 5, line 2, after the word valuation, insert the word date. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
Still on page 5, lines 3 to 4, delete the phrase, which is a transaction between independent, unrelated parties involving no irregularity. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, amendment is approved.
On page 7, on section 4, powers and functions of the Bureau of Local Government Finance. On page 7, line 12, after the word commission, insert the acronym PRC, open parenthesis, PRC, close parenthesis. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 8, section 5, establishment of real property valuation service. On page 8, line 5, on the title of this section, before the word establishment, insert the following phrase, reorganizing the BLGF and. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 8, line 5, after the word to, insert the following words, support the expanded functions of the BLGF and to. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 8, line 6, after the word act, comma, insert the following phrase, the BLGF shall be headed by an assistant secretary, period. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 8, line 6, capitalize the letter T in the word the. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 8, line 7, insert a comma after the word RPVS. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 8, line 9, delete the acronym RPVS and replace it with the words reorganize BLGF. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 8, line 10, before the acronym DBM, insert Department of Budget and Management, then enclose the acronym DBM in parentheses. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the amendment is approved.
Hindi ko nabasa yung mga rational. Minor lang siya. Okay, just tell me yung mga major. Is it a major rational? Yung mga ano lang, importante lang. Yeah. On section 6, establishment of real property valuation unit. On page 8, line 13, delete the acronym LGU and replace it with the phrase province and city, period. Municipalities may also create an RPVU under the office of the respective local assessors, period. So moved, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
Yeah. And Mr. President, just to manifest the rationale of this amendment proposes that the RPVU will only be mandatory for provinces and cities while optional for municipalities, considering the fiscal capacity of municipalities and the realities that some municipal assessors' office already have a lean office staffing. So, Mr. President, I move to Section 7, supervisory role of BLGF Executive Director over the RPVS. On page 8, line 16, before the word BLGF, insert the words head of the and delete the words Executive Director. So moved, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, amendment is approved.
On page 8, line 17, before the word BLGF, insert the words head of the and delete the words Executive Director. So moved, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 8, line 11, insert section 7 found in line 16 to 19, interchanging section 6 and section 7 in effect, and renumber accordingly. So moved, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On section 8, creation of central consultative committees. On page 8, line 22, delete the phrase internationally accepted and replace with the word international. So moved, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 1, before the word BLGF, insert the words head of the and delete the words Executive Director. So moved, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 2, delete the words each from the and replace with the following phrase, from each of the following. So moved, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 8, delete the word and. So moved, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 9, delete period and replace it with the following semicolon end. So moved, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, after line 9, insert the following words. Number 8, enclosed in parenthesis, real estate sector, period. So moved, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 10, after the phrase provided that, insert the following words. Members of the Central Consultative Committee, comma, or their representatives, comma, shall be entitled to receive a per diem, comma, pursuant to existing law, comma, regulations, and other issuances, colon, provided, comma, further, comma, that. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 12, delete the period and replace it with a colon. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 13, delete the letter C enclosed in parenthesis and insert the phrase provided, comma, furthermore, comma, that. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 14, delete the period and replace it with the following phrase, colon, provided, comma, finally, comma, that. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 16, after the word duly, insert the words authorized and. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, delete lines 17 to 20 pertaining to subsection D and renumber accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 21, delete the phrase at the initiation and replace it with the word upon the call. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9 to 21, after the word chairperson, page 9, line 21, after the word chairperson, insert the following phrase, comma, with due notice to the members, comma. So move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 9, line 24, after the word valuation, insert the following sentence, period. The committee shall ensure that there will be equal opportunity for the participation of public and private sector representatives.
Are there any
So moved,
objec-
Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
Mr. President, let me just repeat it for the benefit of the stenographers. My amendment is on page 9, line 24, after the word valuation, insert the following sentence, period. The committee shall ensure that there will be equal opportunity for the participation of public and private sector representatives as resource persons. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
And that's amendment from Senator Chis Escudero, for the record, Mr. President. On page 10, line 1, before the word secretariat, insert the phrase BLGF shall serve as the. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 10, line 1, capitalize the letter S in the word secretariat. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 10, lines 1 to 2, delete the phrase shall be handled by the existing organic personnel or units of the BLGF. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
Rational. The rationale here. Yeah. Kay Senator Chis. Sa kanya yan, di ba? Well, Mr. President, let me again manifest the rationale for this amendment. The inclusion of the real estate sector in the membership of the Central Consultative Committee and the equal opportunity amendment for the participation of public and private sector representatives in the Consultative Committee were proposed by the good gentleman from Sorsogon, Honorable Chis Escudero. This is an excellent amendment as it will balance the views received by the committee, thereby allowing them to issue well-informed recommendation. The other proposed amendments for this section are merely for clarification purposes only and as a matter of style. So, Mr. President, we move to page 10, section 9, the role of BLGF regional offices. On page 10, line 7, before the word region, insert the word respective. Then, after the word region, insert the word concern. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 10, the Regional Consultative Committee. On page 10, line 21, delete the phrase representatives from the. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 10, line 22, before the acronym BIR, insert the phrase head of the. Then, after the word office, insert the phrase or their duly authorized representative. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 10, line 23, before the acronym DNR, insert the phrase head of the. Then, after the word office, insert the phrase or their duly authorized representative. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 11, line 5, after the word sector, insert a comma and the phrase who is licensed by the PRC, comma. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 11, line 13, delete the following phrase. Letter B, enclose in parentheses, preferably, comma, majority of the members of the Regional Consultative Committee, and replace it with the following sentences. Provided, comma, that the members of the Regional Consultative Committee, comma, and their representatives, comma, or their representatives, comma, shall be entitled to receive a per diem, comma, pursuant to existing law, comma, regulations, comma, and other issuances, colon, provided, comma, further, comma, that representatives who will attend on behalf of the respective heads shall be duly qualified, comma, and authorized by the organizations, colon, provided, comma, furthermore, comma, that the representatives of the BIR and DNR and renumber accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 11, line 16, delete the phrase at the initiation and replace with the words upon the call. So move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 11, line 16, after the word director, insert the following phrase, comma, with due notice to its members, comma. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 11, line 20, after the period, add a sentence as follows. The committee shall ensure that there will be equal opportunity for the participation of public and private sector representatives as resource persons, period. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
Okay. And let me just manifest again, Mr. President, the rationale for that amendment. The amendments regarding the list of members in the Regional Consultative Committee are intended to ensure proper representation of the concerned agencies in the said body. Again, the equal opportunity amendment therein was proposed by the good gentleman from Sorsogon, similar to his earlier amendment in Section 8 of this bill. So we go to Section 11, Function of the Regional Consultative Committee. On page 11, line 22, delete the phrase "a body" and replace with the words "the forum." I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 12, Section 12, Development of Valuation Standards. On page 12, line 12, delete the phrase "concerned parties" and replace it with "persons, comma, entities." I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 12, line 15, delete "internationally accepted" and replace with "international." I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 12, line 16, after the phrase "shall review the," insert "Philippine Valuation Standards," then enclose the acronym PVS with parentheses. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 12, line 16, after the phrase "every 3 years," insert the phrase "or as often as may be necessary." I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
On page 12, line 17, after the word "valuation," insert the phrase "with due consideration of the prevailing economic conditions." I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the amendment is approved.
This is your amendment, Mr. Presiding Officer, Mr. President. And let me just once again manifest, the Honorable Senator from Las Piñas, Senator Mark Villar, proposed the last amendment for this section wherein the development of the valuation standards will take into consideration the prevailing economic conditions. So, Mr. President, that's part one of the amendments. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2386. I so move, Mr. President.
Are there any objections? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, our Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel, would like to avail of the privileged hour. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Our distinguished colleague, Senator Coco Pimentel, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, my dear fellow senators, and everybody else. Today, I rise on a matter of personal and collective privilege to render a report on my attendance to the 2024 World Government Summit, which was held in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, from February 12 to 14, 2024. So in effect, Mr. President, I am following the practice of Senator Pia Cayetano whenever she goes abroad to attend the conference, she renders a report. And she claims that she's doing this because she was advised by my father, Mr. President, to do it. So pursuant to my own father's advice, indirectly reaching me, Mr. President. So I was invited by His Excellency Omar Sultan Al Ulama, the UAE Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, Digital Economy, and Remote Work Applications, to attend the said summit. And fortunately, the Senate President approved my trip. And of course, I'd like to thank the UAE Ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Mohammed Obaid Al-Khatam Al-Zaabi, for following up my attendance, and also for being there in the conference, Mr. President, to to be with me, and he arranged my meeting with their Senate President, or the head of their Senate. At the outset, I noticed from the agenda published on the WGS website that artificial intelligence was a prevalent theme for the sessions. And in fact, it was the UAE Minister of State for AI who invited me. So this and the fact that the UAE even has a minister for AI captured my interest. For the information of all, the World Government Summit is an annual gathering dedicated to harnessing innovation and technology to solve global challenges faced by humanity. This year, the theme is was centered on shaping future governments, which aim to empower governments to identify innovative solutions for a better future. 6 primary topics were highlighted during the summit. Number 1, government acceleration and transformation. Number 2, artificial intelligence and the next frontiers. Number 3, reimagining development and future economies. Number 4, future societies and education. Number 5, sustainability and the new global shifts. And number 6, urbanization and global health priorities. The following are the noteworthy ideas which were espoused during the summit. In the session entitled, A Conversation with the CEO of NVIDIA, who will shape the future of AI, which was discussed with Mr. Jensen Huang, founder and CEO of NVIDIA, a company known for manufacturing graphics processing units, GPUs, and video cards for computers. 2 things stood out. First, it was suggested that in the future, children may no longer need to know how to code or understand computer language because computer applications would become so advanced that ordinary users could utilize them without coding knowledge. Well, I do not necessarily agree with this statement, but let us see. Okay. Second, it was proposed that in the future, there would be no more discoveries because, I will, in quotation marks, everything would be engineered. So in my view, both predictions are concerning and interesting, Mr. President. His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, said that world leaders who have the most concentration of powers do not use these powers to help other disadvantaged people. I made a deliberate effort to attend the sessions on the so-called pandemic agreement. And from this, I gathered the following. May 2024 is the target date for the finalization of the so-called pandemic treaty proposed by the World Health Organization. The Director General of the WHO believes that it is only a matter of time until the next pandemic will hit the world. At present, his opinion is the world remains inadequately prepared for the looming threat of the next pandemic. This pandemic treaty will be a binding accord, and that there are currently 2 tracks of negotiation being pursued. One is the pandemic treaty, it's the WHO pandemic treaty itself, and the other is the amendments to the international health regulations. Emerging from the sessions on the pandemic treaty, I am concerned about the lack of involvement of the Senate or briefings provided to the Senate regarding the negotiations on these 2 tracks by our Philippine delegation. Given the intended binding nature of this document, it is imperative that it undergoes the Senate's scrutiny for concurrence. I also had the occasion to participate in sessions addressing renewable energy, from which I learned the following. There is an increasing global focus on decarbonization. Efforts are underway to augment the share of renewables in the energy mix. Diversity of fuels must be pursued. The widespread adoption of hydrogen as an energy source is anticipated to take approximately 10 years still. And the many challenges facing renewables include their intermittent nature, lack of energy storage infrastructure, presence of monopolies, geopolitical considerations, and government practice. After this talk, I recall an instance in the past when I asked our Philippine experts during the budget committee hearings po ito, about the current viability of hydrogen as an energy source in the country, to which they answered in the affirmative, and even said that we already have the technology. So it appears that our Philippine experts, or those I talked to from government, know something or know insights not widely known among their international counterparts. Because as I've learned in the WGS, wala pa pong working commercial model or engine or apparatus which creates energy from hydrogen, Mr. President. I also made sure to attend the session with Her Highness Sheikha Latifa bint Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, discussing how governments foster creativity. Her Highness elaborated on Dubai's creative strategy, including the establishment of one-stop shops for licensing, permitting, and financing, as well as the creation of creative zones, which involved land use, caps on rent, incentives, and funding options. She stressed the importance of listening to the stakeholders and the value of inclusivity. Having shepherded RA number 11904, otherwise known as the Creatives Law, here in the Senate, I sought to draw comparisons between the Philippine experience and that of Dubai. I think I consulted with my staff to ask them what's the status of the Philippine Creatives Law, and regrettably, the news I received, the information I got is that even the composition of the Philippine Creatives Industries Development Council remains incomplete as of this moment, or up to this moment. So this simple matter poses a hindrance to the full implementation of the law. From the talks on anti-corruption and supreme audit institutions, I learned that Egypt has produced programs aimed at encouraging people to reject corruption through the development of ethical values within the educational curriculum. Everyone was in agreement that it is essential to have strong accountability institutions and that citizens are a crucial part of the accountability ecosystem. The importance of transparency in the budget process, open to citizens' scrutiny, was also highlighted. It was also mentioned there that the words to be used in the budget law must be easily understood by the people. These are ideas which we can implement in our own budget practices. From the sessions on sustainable cities, as well as the roundtable of city mayors, which was attended by our own mayor, Iloilo Mayor, Mayor Jerry Treñas was there, who talked about, I think, his 3 parks in Iloilo. The following key ideas emerge. Number 1, a healthy city must have good air and water quality, reliable water supply and proper sewage system, a livable environment, decent workspaces, accessible housing and educational opportunities, and affordable, nutritious food. Number 2, a city must have affordable healthcare, equitable access to healthcare services, and outreach initiatives targeting vulnerable groups. Number 3, health considerations must be integrated in all policies. The impact of climate change should be considered, and living spaces should be close to work, with emphasis on creating walkable and bike-friendly cities. And number 4, cities are legacies. Thus, we must preserve small cities and make them livable. There was even a term used, fractal cities, Mr. President. So I believe you can apply these principles to our own barangays, so transforming them into our own version of livable communities. The World Government Summit likewise serves as a platform for networking, and in our particular case, I had the distinct honor of meeting with the President of the Federal National Council of the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Saker Gobash. During our meeting, I had the opportunity to thank His Excellency for the UAE's commendable care of our migrant workers. Although I learned from our conversation that the UAE does not prefer the use of the term migrant, and when we shifted to the Department of Migrant Workers, there was some confusion, Mr. President, because they do not want our OFWs there to be called migrant workers. May loaded meaning yata yung word na migrant po sa kanilang legal system. I conveyed our appreciation for the UAE's many assistance to our country during disasters and natural calamities. So His Excellency, their President of the Federal National Council, sought our assistance in facilitating the signing of a memorandum of understanding on the topic of cooperation in the field of improvement and development of government activities, which is a government exchange program. It appears that the MOU is pending before the DBM. So I assure His Excellency that the Senate will exert efforts to follow up this MOU. So the Philippines and the UAE will be celebrating 50 years of bilateral relations this year in August. I see this milestone as an opportune time to organize the association, our friendship association, the Philippines-UAE Parliamentary Friendship Association, so that we can participate or we can sponsor the holding of activities to celebrate this significant anniversary. And for those of you who are attentive, you may have noticed that I just recently filed a bill to declare August 19 of every year as a special day to commemorate Philippines-UAE Friendship Day, which happens to be also Quezon Day, according to Senator Risa. The World Government Summit offers a varied range of topics tackled in its many sessions. As legislators, I believe it is worthwhile for us to invest our time in judiciously learning from these global best practices and establishing network with officials from other nations. And it was also a chance to meet our kababayans in the UAE, as shown in our pictures. And then the UAE in 2026, I think, will authorize already their air taxis, Mr. President. So that was one. So I told them that, in the Philippines, we are still debating on our motorcycle taxis. Okay. So I think that is still under a pilot testing by the DOTR, Mr. President, pilot study for already 5 years now. So I thank the Senate President for giving me the opportunity to attend the 2024 edition of the World Government Summit. And I urge the continued attendance of the representatives of the Senate if we are invited in future World Government Summits in Dubai. It will really be a fruitful experience, Mr. President. So, maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that very extensive and enlightening speech on your very productive visit. Session suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we refer the speech of the distinguished Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel, to the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation, and Futures Thinking, and the Committee on Foreign Relations as secondary committee. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, this juncture, I move that we proceed with the additional reference of business.
Motion, is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Second additional reference of business resolution, PSR number 935, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct oversight on the implementation of the free senior high school assessment and certification support program for TVL learners and its related programs under the General Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2024 for the purpose of inquiring on the issuance of the joint guidelines and on the readiness of the DepEd and the TESDA as co-implementors of the program and crafting complementary or amendatory legislation by Senator Gatchalian.
Referred to the committees on basic education, higher technical and vocational education, and finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just some administrative matters with the consent of the body. Senator Lauren Legarda requested that her co-sponsorship speech on the AFASA bill and the 4 House concurrent resolutions granting amnesty be inserted into the records, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this juncture, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, February 26, 2024.
Is there any objection? There being none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, February 26, 2024.
Advance happy birthday to